Hey, basketball fans, it is your favorite WNBA show, Around the Rim, and we are coming to you with the semifinals edition of our show. LaChina Robinson joined alongside Terrika Foster-Brasby as usual, and the WNBA playoff / now semifinals are in full effect. The Las Vegas Aces and the Dallas Wings are in a best-of-5 series. Aces are up 2-0 in that series, and then New York and Connecticut are all tied up 1-1 in the best of 5. And New York lost a game at home, so the series is about to shift to Connecticut for 2 games and back to New York if necessary for a game 5. Dallas is facing a closeout situation here as game 3s commence on Friday. So, Terrika, how you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm honestly doing great.
I'm not doing as great because, as you can see, my hair is not doing great, but it's okay. This is what happens when your stylist doesn't have time to actually do your hair, just, fluff it up. And I got a lot of hair, so y'all gonna have to deal with it today. But let's start with the New York Connecticut series, because we just got word actually from ESPN that that series on Tuesday was actually the most viewed WNBA playoff game on cable in 22 years. It was an average of 563,000 viewers, but it peaked at 721,000 viewers.
22 years. That is crazy.
Which is amazing. And then the Aces versus Wings game, it actually had 522,000 viewers, and 608,000 is where they peaked. So a lot of eyes are on the WNBA semifinals right now, Terrika, and for good reason. But going back to that New York Connecticut series, I have been thoroughly impressed with Connecticut. First, let me just say that Stephanie White was the coach of the year for good reason. The woman knows what she's doing. To go into Barclays with the number 2 seed and steal a game on the road is the game plan of every coach that is in a best of 5 in a 2-2-1 format. And there are a number of places that you could point to as far as Connecticut's success so far, because even though they lost game 2, they didn't play bad. Like that game literally was up for grabs, even with some adversity, which we can get to. But I'll start with the Connecticut Sun, where I felt like, and Andrea talked about this on our show a little bit when we talked about everyone's keys to the game. She said she felt like it would be Connecticut's guards, their guard play. And in game 1, it absolutely was. And she didn't even necessarily mean the starting guards. But long story short, Rebecca Allen came in and had 18 points against her old team, was 4 for 6 from the field, 7 rebounds. Tip Hayes had 12 and 7 rebounds. I thought, Ty Harris came in and had 4 points. Natisha Heidemann had 12, 4 for 9. Like, their guards really stepped up. Of course, DB did her thing with 20 and 7. Didn't shoot that efficiently, but had a good night. Hit big shots when it mattered down the stretch. Alyssa Thomas had 8 points and 10 rebounds. Olivia Nelson-Ododa has been a very welcome surprise against an interior game for New York, in particular Jonquel Jones, that can really dominate the game and has played well in this series throughout the regular season. So, T, what did you see in that game 1 that Connecticut was able to do to get the win?
Yeah, definitely. I think one thing that played in their favor, which will kind of be opposite when we talk about game 2, is the way that they were defended by New York. I think that the man-to-man versus the zone defense was one of the biggest things that favored Connecticut in this game. And they took advantage of it strongly in game 1. I've been so incredibly impressed by Olivia Nelson-Ododa and just her aggressiveness on the boards, because that is where Jonquel is going to kill you every time. But she's been so aggressive in that. And of course, DB and AT, the dynamic duo and what they're continuing to do and show really showed up big for them in game 1. But I think that they knew coming into this game mentally that that's really where they were going to need to get over the hump, was the mental hurdle of knowing that we were down 0-4 to this team coming into the season, but also feeling the ability that we know that we can do it because we've done it before. Now, of course, the makeup of the team is a bit different than it was when they had to do this against Chicago last season. But again, I just think that this team was mentally prepared to come in and do that. We've talked all season. I know you know that I've said it. I've said it to you that the offensive production from Connecticut's guards is what will make the difference in any game that they play. Rebecca Allen was that for game one. Tiffany Hayes, my God, game two was incredible. So yeah, like to me, those were the biggest factors. But I think that's just the way that they were defending. And then also, and I know that you spoke about this, and I'm sure we're going to get into it, but Breanna Stewart has not been stewing in this postseason.
I definitely want to get to New York, but to put a bow on Connecticut, in that first game, I just thought to your point, their defense was stellar. They held New York to 34% shooting from the field, 30% from 3-point land. They only had 8 3-pointers. They would normally have, 11 is what they average. They had 13 points off of turnovers. So I thought they played their game. And I go back to Stephanie White's game management in both games, quite honestly. And I just thought she did a brilliant job making sure Nelson Adota was ready for that moment. She's had to weather some foul trouble and has done that just seamlessly. I can't say enough about the coaching job that she has done. Even game 2 when Heidemann had to go out and she was in the locker room for a while. Just a lot, but Stephanie's a great coach. We know that. But going back to New York, yes, Breanna Stewart we have yet to see Breanna Stewart in this series, which you can take. I think after game 1, everyone was like, okay, Stewie will come back in game 2. But this is where you start to get worried if you're Sandy Brondello, because if you're going to go on the road, you need Breanna Stewart's offense, right? You know how tough it is to score against Connecticut. And you mentioned the zone, which was a difference in game 2, which gave Connecticut some trouble. They weren't able to score against that zone effectively. But in game 1, Breanna Stewart had 19 points, which sounds great, 6 rebounds. Was 7 for 25 from the field, 0 for 8 from 3-point land. Sabrina Ionescu was 4 for 14 from the field. She actually played well early on and gave them a chance to get into it. But second half of game 1 was all Connecticut. Jonquel Jones, as I mentioned, she has been slowed a bit by Olivia Nelson-Ododa. Now, what I will say is that Stewie had a much better game 2. Because she may not have done what she's used to doing point wise, but when you look at her collective impact on the game, she had 5 assists, 5 blocks, 11 rebounds, but she only had 11 points. And New York was still able to win. They won that game because Benijah Laney had 20 points and was 7 for 11. She had quite the bounce back after a slow game 1.
And it was in the second half too. Like Benijah Laney really started to eat up because I was live. I was at that game on Tuesday, and Benijah really started to show up in that third quarter. The fourth quarter is when she really dominated, and she couldn't be stopped on either end. Like she was defensively sound. She was, hitting the big shots. But this was a stat that stood out to me. Breanna Stewart went 1 for 20 on her first 23-point field goal attempts in the Liberty's first 4 playoff games. And so this says to me that it's not just necessarily she's been struggling offensively against Connecticut. She's been struggling offensively throughout this entire postseason, right? And so, I think there was a game, who was it? I think she had like 22 in one of those matchups. But either way, I think the point is they are starting to put pressure on her, and where Connecticut is finding success is that while also applying that pressure, they're starting to get offensive production off of their bench that has been helpful for them, which is something that I haven't been able to do previously. And that's going to be big for them going into game 3. They've got to continue that defensive pressure, but they also got to keep getting big points out of Ty Harris. They also have to have to get complete minutes out of Olivia Nelson-Ododa. And we've still not been able to see Dejanay Carrington, who's been battling with that foot injury, really show up and give us Dejanay Carrington type minutes. So there is still a lot of upside for this Connecticut team. If you're going back home, you feel good about where you are, even in that loss on Tuesday. Whereas for New York, and I was asked about this previously in terms of momentum, I feel like you naturally want to think that a team that just came off of a win has momentum going into the next game. But I'm not sure that I feel that for New York. I don't think they have the momentum going into game 3. I think just Connecticut being able to steal game 1, knowing that they didn't have a terrible showing in game 2, I think they have the momentum going in game 3 that really puts New York in a precarious situation.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. And people are always like, y'all are New York Liberty haters. Just so everybody knows, we don't care. Like, we
At
really don't
all.
care who wins. So y'all can just miss us with all of that.
Stop it.
But the facts are the facts. And if anything, we're very educated on what these teams have done this season, what they normally look like, what their challenges are, because we are locked into this league in general. But you're right. You know, I thought that Stewie getting the MVP award, which we'll get to later on, right before game 2 would be an emotional boost for the team. But they still came out, you know, rather flat and had to find their way. I thought Vandersloot was huge with her 19 points. You know, when she scores, this team is really dangerous. That takes pressure off of Stewie. It takes pressure off of Jonquel, who the two of them combined only had 22 points. But Benaja continues to save the day, whether it's with her defense, whether it's what she's done offensively. Her ability to bounce back is what we haven't seen quite yet with Stewie in terms of her shooting. I told you this 3/4 of the way through the regular season. I said, Stewie is going to be tired. I said that.
Yep.
I said that.
You did.
I know people are going to say, well, oh, it's playoff basketball. Everybody, Breanna Stewart plays basketball year round. Connecticut is a very physical team, which doesn't help. I've been watching Breanna Stewart literally play every moment of her career since she arrived at UConn, and probably even a couple years before that. This is not Stewie. And I'm not trying to take anything away from Connecticut, but I've seen her miss wide open shots, even around the rim, that she can make with her eyes closed. So I think she's tired. She's either tired or she is injured and not saying it. But hey, that's just me. Nonetheless, if they want to survive and advance, the time is now. You're going to Connecticut. That's not going to be easy. This is a team that is so tough minded. They play so well as a unit. They are bought into what they're doing on both ends of the floor. There is like no selfishness, no, like when you look at the 4 teams in these playoffs, and obviously Vegas is a little more elevated, but even Vegas has the tendency to fall into the moment of a game. Connecticut is so consistent in how they come at you. And I'm not saying they don't make mistakes. I'm not saying every once in a while they may take a bad shot, but everybody is their approach to the game is consistent. And that can be hard. Consistency can be hard to beat. So
I think the last thing I would say on that is the last time this team, when we talk about mental hurdles and mental toughnesses, the last time this New York team came into Connecticut, granted they won in an overtime game, they were down 20 points at one point.
Yeah.
Like, Connecticut is not an easy place to play. Now, we know the crowd is different. We know the atmosphere in terms of the star power is a bit different, but those fans go hard and they're going to make that environment very hostile for New York in terms of the energy that they're going to bring. So they've got to keep that in mind, that, you know, this is a place they've fallen into a trap before and they don't want to fall into that trap again.
Yeah. I think Nelson Adota has to continue to be solid. Pip Hayes has got to continue to do what she's doing. Alyssa Thomas, I don't mind her numbers. She was 2 for 13. She also has to guard Breanna Stewart the whole game. Like, she's doing a lot. But Maureen Johannes has yet to make an impact. I just don't. That part I don't understand. Is like, what is happening with her minutes? I just felt like she relieved this team in so many situations during the regular season. So we'll keep our eyes on that series. Moving on to Dallas, Vegas. This series could be over. This series could be over. And I'm going to backtrack. I am going to seriously backtrack because I came on this show and said that I thought that the Wings had an opportunity to upset Vegas. They don't. They don't. There has never been a team that has come back from an 0-2 deficit in a best-of-5 series in the history of this league. And ladies and gentlemen, it is not going to happen in this series.
Do you not think they can at least get one in Dallas? Because there were moments in game two, particularly towards the end, where I felt that they understood the urgency, where you started to see Tierra get a bit more aggressive. I really don't think they've used Kalani properly personally, but do you think that there isn't an opportunity for them to at least steal one in Dallas?
I do. I think they could absolutely win a game. I'm just saying they're not going to win the series. They're not.
Okay.
And it comes down, we'll get into the numbers in a moment. And I want to talk about, obviously how dominant Vegas has been as well, because they look great. But Dallas has been able to stay like within 10 points. Like that's just the thing. They're not getting blown out. They were within 4 with like a minute to go in game 2. The issue is the lack of discipline. There is a lack of discipline on this team, in particular in what they're doing on the offensive end. I don't know what they're doing on the offensive end 75% of the time in a game. Like, I don't think their shots have looked rushed. They have looked just out of sorts. They have looked like maybe at moments the moment is too big for them. It's really, in my opinion, what it's showing inexperience. That's what it's showing. It's showing inexperience. This is a team that the organization hasn't been to the semifinals since 2009, and a lot has happened since then, including moving from your hometown in Detroit to Tulsa to Dallas to, so many things happen. So this is a young team, and they're so talented, and that's why I'm passionate about this. I'm not upset with Dallas. I came in saying that they could shock the world. I am just coming to the realization that there is an experience gap. And that's not to take anything away from Vegas, but when you look at this Dallas roster, they have a lot of amazing pieces. So game 1, they lost 97 to 83, and Vegas had as much as a 20-point lead in that game. A'ja Wilson has been stellar. I think she is on a roll right now where she has had 30 or more points in every playoff game so far. That's never happened in the history of this league. So she is too much. She's too much. And I came in feeling like the front line of Dallas was going to be able to possibly give her trouble because of their size, because of their depth, because of their length. They cannot. She has gone around them. She has gone over them. She has gone through them. She looks like a woman possessed. My dad called me the other day and said, A'ja is a woman playing with girls. And he is 100% correct. My dad has 25% of his total vision. He can't even see, but he can see that. Okay. So they lost that game. Satu, 16.7 rebounds in game 1. Arike had 12 points, 4 for 14. Those two have to play well in order for this series to go where it needs to go. Odyssey Sims has come in spots and been brilliant. And that's game 1. And I'll just give you quick numbers on game 2 so you can tell me what you think, T. But game 2 is a little closer towards the end, 91-84. Chelsea Gray was 23 points, 8 assists, 10 for 17 from the field. Her and A'ja, again, A'ja with 30 points. Jackie Young, the game before this, almost had a triple-double. Kelsey Plum has been playing well, right around that 20 point per game. Their starters have just been blowing it away, in particular the core 4. But Dallas was Sabally 13, Natasha Howard with 20, Arike with 24, was 9 for 22, had a better outing. But Vegas just continues to challenge them in terms of points in the paint. They did have 30 to Dallas's 42. First game, actually, the Aces outscored them. Second game, the Wings had more, and the Wings were able to out-rebound them by 1. So I'm going to be quiet now because obviously I'm a little bit emotionally attached to this series, but you tell me what you think.
No, I actually think you hit on a lot of the points that I wanted to touch on, which, for one, when we're starting with Dallas, I've been one who's argued all season long that I think Satu Sabally has to be the difference maker. And that, to me, is the biggest, not going to say issue, but challenge that I see for Dallas, is that Satu Sabally hasn't really been able to play her game, and not necessarily because of anything that she isn't doing, but because of everything that Las Vegas is doing. They knew what they were up against coming in, trying to defend her. And so they've been doing switches on her, and she hasn't been able to handle it. And it's crazy, but I think it speaks to the type of defensive prowess that Las Vegas has. Like, I believed that Satu would come in and drop 20 and 10. And it is just not happened. She's the one who anchors their offense to me. She's someone who I think Enrique depends on in order to draw that extra attention so that she's able to be offensively aggressive. And because Las Vegas has not allowed that, neither of them, who really do need to be the primary scorers for this team, have been able to really find an offensive rhythm. And so that's, to me, like the biggest thing that stands out is just I am worried about their ability to hang in with this Las Vegas team, because one thing you're going to do is, if you can't stop them, you got to outscore them. And I feel like earlier in the season, Dallas had been able to at least do that, or at least come close to doing that. And they haven't been able to do that in this postseason. It brings me to my second thing, which is what you touched on heavily: experience. This is Satu's first playoff game, or first semifinals. I think Enrique has experience being in big moments, but not experience being in the WNBA semifinals. The only person that I can really point to that has the experience is Natasha Howard. She's a 3-time champion. She knows what it means to play like this. She knows what it means to play in this moment. And I love that I have seen some spots from her where she's kind of taken over, where she's kind of tried to assert that experience, but it just has not been enough. But I don't even know where to start when it comes to Las Vegas. I mean, sis, there are no words. A'ja Wilson to me, my God, okay. I also agreed with you that there would be some challenges for her from a size perspective. A'ja has had 5 different primary defenders on her, and only one of them have been able to keep her under 60%. And that was only 60% for a quarter. Wasn't even for the whole game. And what can you do when you have that kind of power and dominance that you've got to figure out? It's going to frustrate you, and that inexperience is going to show, and again, cause you to play undisciplined. That is what we're seeing from this Dallas team. I'm with you. I 100% thought this was the team that could shock the world. I 100% came into this thinking that if there's one team that is going to be able to contend against Las Vegas and make this thing difficult for them, it is going to be Dallas. I don't know.
They happen.
They get game 3. I believe they can get game 3.
But I believe they can win a game. I think they can win a game in Dallas. I do.
Sunday is over.
Yeah, I think they can definitely win a game in Dallas. But
Sunday is over.
I don't know. So
I ain't got nothing else for you.
Yeah, but I mean, overall, the Wings have to be, happy they've had a great season. There's a tremendous upside as this team grows together. I really think they're missing like a true, yank everybody to the middle and get everybody on the same page point guard. Like, they need a point guard. They need a point guard that can just command, demand, whatever you got to do, that this is what we are doing here. And right now their point guard is their head coach, Latricia Trammell. And it just, and that's nothing against Dangerfield or Odyssey Sims, but it's a certain type of point guard that you need to run that specific team. And I don't think they have it.
A'ja, to me, played like she felt like she should have been the MVP.
Yeah. So let's get to that. So semifinals, games 3s are on Friday. You guys can tune in. MVP came in and it was named Breanna Stewart. It's the second MVP award of her career. She won in 2018 in Seattle. She was 24. Now she's 29. She's in New York. It's the first ever MVP award for the New York Liberty organization. We have gone over and over on this show about MVP criteria. We've talked about how close this race was between Stewart and Alyssa Thomas and A'ja Wilson. You've shared, who you were voting for. I shared who I was voting for. We both voted for Alyssa Thomas, and she did not get it, but it was a very close race, T. So how close was it for the people?
Yeah, so for those who are unfamiliar with the voting process, first, let's just let them know that the voting process for MVP is a tiered voting. So you would vote for your top 5 players, 1 through 5, and there is a point value assessed to each tier that a player receives a vote. So if you received a first place vote, you get 10 points. Second place vote, you get 7 points. Third place vote, 5 points. 3 points for fourth, and 1 point for fifth. And so The cumulative total of all of those votes together is what will determine who will win the MVP award. So Breanna Stewart won with a total points of 446 votes. Alyssa Thomas came in second with a total of 439 votes. And Asia Wilson came in third with a total of 433 votes. The next person after that would have been Nafisa Collier, who had 109 votes. And so a lot of the controversy came after this was announced because Alyssa Thomas actually received the most first place votes, which was 23 votes, to Stewie's 20 and Asia's 17. However, she received the least amount of second place votes with 12 votes, and she received the highest amount of third place votes with 25. Whereas Breanna Stewart did not win first or second in any of the voting categories. She had 20 first place votes, 17 third place votes, and 23 second place votes. So ultimately, the tiering of the second and third place votes helped her to accumulate more overall points, which put her at the top of the list to ended up winning MVP. And I think that confused a lot of the fans who were looking at this, who might not have known or had an idea of how the voting takes place. If I'm not mistaken, they vote very similarly in the NBA. So this isn't different than a standard that is already put in place. But I'll be the first to say I hate it. And I don't hate it just this year because of Alyssa. I've hated it for quite a while. And the reason that I've hated it, and I've hated it in the NBA, is because there is no other award individually that is tiered other than MVP. You're not asking me to give you my top 5 rookies. You're not asking me to give you my top 5 most improved players. You're asking me to tell you who's the one player that you think I believe deserve this award. And the MVP is the only award that's ranked. And I have not understood it. I've not felt like it was fair. I think people know who they feel like is the best player for whatever their philosophy is. And again, we've discussed philosophy many times. So I understand the ranking for all WNBA. I understand rankings for all defensive. I understand that that would make sense in that moment. But it has never made sense for me when it comes to voting for MVP. And it just doesn't make sense for me now. This has actually happened before in 2005, I believe it was, or it may have been 2009. But before, Lauren Jackson actually received more first place votes, and Cheryl Swoops actually received more cumulative votes. And so she was awarded the MVP for that season. But just in my personal opinion, I mean, I feel like there are things that can be replicated, things that can be duplicated, and things that we just don't know if we'll ever see again. And as much as I understood the case for every single player who won MVP, I felt like this was that opportunity for Alyssa Thomas that we may never see again. And that is not to say that she won't ever have a great WNBA season, but the historical context of what she was able to do, the makeup of her team, and how she was able to really put it on her back, the way that she kind of put herself out there this year is something that I don't think we'll ever see again. I don't think it will be replicated. And I don't know if her opportunity to be in the MVP race will be as clear in another season as it was this season. So selfishly, yes, I kind of felt bad because I really felt like it was hers and I felt like she deserved it. But ultimately, I just think the way that we decide the MVP really needs to be reevaluated. And I felt this way well before this season.
Yeah, a few things. One is I think the person that gets the most first place votes should be the MVP. That's just my opinion.
Period.
Because the most number of people thought they were the MVP. I mean, you don't even have to get rid of the tiering system. It's just whoever gets more first place votes, that's it. So that's one thing. The other thing is, and again, everyone had a great season. I'm not taking anything away from Stewie or Asia. I do feel like, to your point, Alyssa has a smaller window. And I do think there's a narrative right now of this Asia versus Stewie that eliminated Alyssa Thomas unfairly. Like, people are so caught up in Asia versus Stewie that they cannot see what Alyssa accomplished this year and how significant it was. And that's sad because for whatever reason, right? Like, if you're going to talk about the league, you should really be educated around like what this means historically. And I'm not talking about the people that thought she was in third place. I'm talking to the people that thought she shouldn't have been in the race. The people who thought it was just Asia or Stewie and that's it. That's because you are not doing your due diligence and actually looking at the facts. There were three very strong candidates, period. So the other thing to know is that all first, second, and third place votes went to either Asia, Alyssa, or Stewie, except for one. Chelsea Gray got one third place MVP vote, and whoever that voter was put Chelsea in place of Asia, who received a fourth place vote, who is someone who is a hater, should lose their vote, and is clearly showing that they are not qualified to be in this conversation. Even Chelsea Gray herself, I heard, said, like, what? Like, why was I even in the MVP? And I know this is supposed to be subjective, but that's not good. Second of all, I would be all for revealing the votes of who voted for who. Like, put it out there. Who cares? Put it out there. You know what I'm saying? You and I have discussed every thing we voted for on this very show. And we were talking about it before votes were even due to turn in. So it was hard. And I'll be honest with you, Terrika, I was very emotional that day. I was very, very emotional that day because there was this, before they even announced it, I knew that one person was going to win MVP. And what a beautiful moment for that player. Any three of them, like, congratulations, you are the MVP of the league. And then there were going to be two players that were also very deserving that didn't get it. We have heard that all three players shed tears on that day. All three players were emotional, whether we saw Stewie crying, the other two candidates also shed tears not getting the award. Asia said it hurt like hell. Like, that was a tough day. I'm still not quite there. Yep. Because I just, there's just a lot to it that we need to discuss, but we can't get into it today because we got to keep this moving. T's got another podcast show she's got to do, but we want you guys to keep tuning in to the WNBA semifinals, Friday, Sunday, Tuesday, if all necessary, depending on when, 3 games are won by whichever team. And you can check us out on Twitter at Around the Rim. I am at LaChina Robinson. Terrika is at She Knows Sports, and that's it. And I promise I'll have my hair done next week. Bye, y'all.